Disclaimer alert. This information's for education, so don't just go use it. First consult with your financial advisor, because that's way more legit. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining Techie Personal Finance Bootcamp. That jingle was made by Orlando Gomez, and his episode is actually going to be dropping this Friday. So for anyone that's catching this live, you'll be able to catch Orlando's story about how he broke into tech by writing jingles. So I was happy to have him kind of jazz up my compliance alert there. I'm super excited for today's episode. So I have a special guest with me. He's not a techie, he's not in tech, but he's going to be taking the place of kind of that financial expertise, and he's going to be talking about real estate. So I have a real estate expert on. His name is Patrick Soukup, and the awesome thing is he actually helped me get into the house that I am recording this podcast in. So this is the first time I'm recording in this new room. I apologize for the echo. This actually will not be my office or podcast recording studio moving forward. But right now it's bedtime, so I can't be doing it where the normal room is that we need to close off. So I'm super excited to have Patrick. One of the unique things that he helped me and my wife out with is, although we were purchasing local, just down the road basically from us, due to COVID and our children's pediatrician saying, you know what, limit as much as possible. He was really awesome in helping us purchase a home without ever stepping foot in it or going to it. It felt almost like we were out of town buyers, with the small exception where we would actually be able to drive down and drive around the neighborhood and check those things out, which most people out of towners wouldn't be able to do just on a regular basis. So there was also some other unique aspects to that in the future, I'll probably have Patrick back on. We can kind of talk through some of the unique strategies we ended up implementing in order to pull that off. So I'm going to be super excited to ask him questions specifically about how he helps out-of-towners, because Fort Collins, where we live, is a super popular area where a lot of people are moving into from California and all over the country, really. So we'll dig into some of the questions there as far as what to be looking for, how he's able to help those out-of-towners make those purchases. And there's going to be a few other things. So just a quick background on Patrick. He's a real estate expert here in Fort Collins, which is in northern Colorado. And he did not originally start out being a broker, right? And so he's going to share with us the story about his journey, how he ended up being able to help families like my own get into an awesome house, and how he helps kind of remove a lot of the stress and barriers of trying to purchase homes in a market that we're in today. So if you've heard of us being in a real estate bubble, that's another question I'm going to pose to Patrick and hear his thoughts and things that he's seeing and hearing here, at least in Colorado, and give you some advice along those topics. So without further ado, I'm going to be inviting Patrick here onto the show. So thanks for coming on the show today, Patrick.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've been following you and your story and your company since its launch, and honored to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we probably met before Level Up was officially Level Up. There was a kind of a 2-month period where I had to wait on compliance paperwork and all that fun stuff. And that was about the same time, I believe, that you were kind of breaking ground and moving towards starting and launching your own business as well. But you had real estate in your bloodlines and kind of in your background well before that. And I know me and you both went to CSU for school. Did you go to CSU for real estate, or what was that you were aiming for initially?
No. I went to CSU, went through the College of Business, and kind of had a concentration in accounting, and really never even meant to be in real estate. My kind of path was to take over the company that my dad ran for many, many years, but that ended up closing in 2009. So I was a freshman in college in 2007. So in the middle of college, kind of shifted gears and really started real estate pretty much right then. Is my junior year in college began in real estate.
Yeah, so 2009, probably an interesting time. I know here in northern Colorado wasn't impacted as much, but I'm sure there was a lot going on both commercially and residentially with 2008, 2009 kind of financial crisis there.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I got my introduction on a foreclosure bought at the trustee sale, and did a fix and flip, which if you can believe it, we bought it for about $125,000, a single family house here in Fort Collins, and put about 15 grand into it, sold it. I had two other partners, and we each, made about $7,000 on that sale. And, kind of from there, you got the taste of it, and then really haven't stopped since.
Yeah. So what did you start out just kind of jumping right into it that way, or did you end up getting some experience around real estate before going ahead and making that first investment property?
I was very fortunate. I had my friend's dad I had an injury in college. I was an athlete, and he kind of pulled us aside and said, why don't you guys transition because he was an athlete too and had a career-ending injury. And he said, why don't you guys transition that competitive drive and spirit into business? Yep. And I would like you guys to get involved with real estate. And I honestly had no background or clue, family involved with real estate, but not my parents or anything like that. And so I just went along for the ride and, really picked up as much as I could, just was a sponge. And then when my dad closed down his business, I reached out to my uncle. And that summer, I just asked him if I could mentor underneath him. And he's, a pretty busy guy, doesn't hang around the office too much, and just said, hey, if you want to learn, come work for me. And I asked him, what do you do? And he had a property management company that he really just only manages what he owns. And so I went and was a leasing agent for him. So between those two things, I just kind of dove headfirst into real estate and had a little exposure to risk, but not too much. And so I was able to learn on other people's dollars. And then, be in this weird time in 2009 and 10 with both the purchase sale market and also the rental market. And from there, got my real estate license, self-study while I was a junior in college, and just kind of went from there.
Dang. Well, that's awesome that you were able to kind of knock it out while going through school too and getting all that experience, because that just puts you kind of so much further ahead. I took forever to finish college before I figured out what I wanted to do, but that working experience that I had from the credit unions and banks made a huge difference when I was competing for those first kind of entry level positions. And so, yeah, you gained a whole ton of experience while still having that safety net of being able to shift in college or still make connections and focus on something else if you wanted or needed to.
Yeah. Cause honestly, when I graduated, I actually didn't jump into real estate when I graduated. I became an insurance agent for 9 months because I read, a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and they said you need to get sales experience and you need to be able to talk to people. And I only lasted about 9 months. I hated it. And so I quickly transitioned back to working for my uncle full time in property management, which his kind of forte was investments. And then in 2013, started picking up investments for myself, and kind of have just been picking them up since. And then transitioned into, never meant to be a real estate broker or agent, in a million years. Honestly, wasn't a big fan of them. But you're starting in the business, and your friends see that you're buying property, your sister, and they ask if you could help them, and organically transitioned. And then in 2016, I was like, you know what, let's do this. And so I started really focusing full time on the brokerage in 2016.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And yeah, I remember having those conversations with you where you're like, yep, I'm going to start kind of transitioning and kind of doing this more on my own. And that was the same time I was kind of launching. So we kind of went through those past, obviously different spectrums, but it's been cool to see your success. And anyone that's watching this, even if you're not up here in Colorado, Patrick makes some awesome videos, some entertaining videos on Instagram and YouTube. So definitely check those out if you have additional questions. Our conversations are, obviously we only have about 45, 50 minutes to kind of tackle some of these questions. So we're going to be very focused on what we're going to talk about today, but definitely a reason to pull Patrick back into future seasons, as well as just go and check out his content. And even if he's not going to be a realtor that you work with, he just drops a lot of gems and things that you need to know. And quite honestly, it's interesting that you kind of mentioned you just kind of fell into it. And because a lot of people do, and a lot of people though don't make it like their full-time gig, or they kind of just do it randomly, like a couple sales or a couple purchases a year. And I think you've been running into that a lot sometimes with the other agents on the other end, where you're the more mature one, the more seasoned one, and so you're having to carry that deal along. I know you actually had to do that in our situation. So what advice would you give to someone that's like, oh yeah, like I would like to get in and do this, but they don't have the ability, or they don't have the desire to make it like a full-time gig? Do you think that's doable? And if so, like, how should they go about doing it to make sure they don't make mistakes for their clients?
Definitely. Well, and that's what's tough, because really the average deal transactions like 2 to 4 per year per agent, which really, I mean, if you yourself did 2 or 4 financial plans for somebody, you're just not getting enough, practice and experience and really being ingrained in what the market's doing, what products are out there, what type of opportunities are for your clients. And that kind of transitions very similarly to real estate, especially in this market, because it's so unique as far as like escalation clauses, appraisal gaps, inspection items, how quickly can you close, the difference between cash and financed, as you very well know. And if you're an agent that's only doing 2 or 3 deals and maybe putting together 6 or 7 contracts a year, you're just not understanding what that is. So, honestly, what I've talked with, there's a bunch of agents who's reached out to me especially with my brokerage, but I'm very particular who I let underneath it because it is my last name. So I'm very concerned about bringing on like super green agents. And one of the advice that I give them is, go find yourself a team. Find yourself somebody you can kind of put yourself underneath their wing, that there's doing good volume, good transactions, so that you're getting to see the negotiation side of things, how they're going and showing properties, how they're finding and keeping new clients, how they're nurturing their existing clients and past clients. And then on the listing side, how they're marketing, how they're presenting it to the value, what their value proposition is. All while, making a fraction of the money that you potentially could make on your own, but really learning good processes and systems under somebody who's been doing it for a long time. So that'd probably be my number one advice. If you're considering doing this, go find a good team or somebody to join who you can be kind of, the gopher, and you can go pick up signs and do things that aren't necessarily super sexy about real estate, but all the while you're either getting paid a salary or a minimal, percentage of the deal, but getting a good volume.
Yeah.
And, so I think that's probably what's most important is getting enough transactions underneath your belt so that you know what you're doing. For
sure. And I felt, well, and I guess I'll throw my wife under the bus a little bit here, because when we first started looking for houses this year, she was like, well, like, do we have to pay someone? Like, maybe we can just do this on our own. I was like, for one, like, you don't even want to go into these houses. Like, I don't know how you're going to work these deals. But then, like, obviously I had you, and I'm like, whenever we're ready to go, like stop messaging all these random realtors. Like, we're going to go with Patrick, and like, he's going to help us. And like, the reason why we kind of had that false confidence is we bought 2 houses before we had realtors though. And like, those processes seem pretty straightforward and easy, at least on our end. But technically that's what a realtor is supposed to do. It's supposed to make it seem easy and feel good. And despite all that, like, this was such a unique kind of market, as well as the route that we were taking, the path that we taken. There's not any amount of value or cost that I would have said it was too high for you to be able to help us with this situation. So like, it's ridiculous, like, how complex something could get and how something could go horribly wrong. And it could cost not only the client, but it could cost this person like their career too. Like, you don't want to make a huge mistake early on and then just kind of get burnt out or blown out of the career path. And what you suggest, I think that's pretty common for a lot of positions, a lot of professional kind of career paths. Is like, why take the risk of doing things on your own? Like, get a lot of at-bats. Yes, you do grunt stuff. You have to kind of pull that support, but you also get a steady paycheck, and you get to actually learn what's good, not just kind of random things. And so, whether you're in tech, whether you're a financial planner, whether you're in real estate, if you're starting out something new, you don't want to screw that up or screw anything up. and it doesn't make a whole ton of sense to just start out green on your own and make a huge mistake for someone.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be just this false sense of, greed almost, right? Because you can get a lot of money doing this, but also I look at my wife and I talk to her, I'm like, I don't know how anyone would even want to do this for doing 2 to 4 deals a year. Like, it's just, it's decent money, but at the same time, like, if you're going to have the systems and processes in place, there's a lot of overhead as well. And just go find somebody that you can just do a lot of deals with, because deals are fun, Deals are definitely the fun part of the negotiations.
Yeah, once they get going, right? Not when like you're on that outside looking in of these crazy deals kind of escalating. So that takes us kind of to one of the questions. So everyone's heard it now. They know someone, or maybe it's been happening to them, where they just get outbid. Someone's coming in with all this cash and just pouring it on this offer on a home. Are we in a real estate bubble? What's kind of your take on that?
Definitely. Well, I would say, so I myself, and I'm still looking for property here in Fort Collins to invest in, and in Northern Colorado. This year we bought a duplex in Loveland and a triplex in Greeley. And I'm confident in at least Northern Colorado's market. I'm very fortunate that I'm working with people from all over the country moving here, from Florida to Chicago, Boston, South Dakota, California, Washington, and Texas. I mean, all over the place. And so I think that, the reason why this bubble term keeps getting thrown around is because 25% appreciation year over year just doesn't sound very healthy for a real estate market when you're talking $500,000 asset value. So, I would say it's a concern of mine, because this market just doesn't seem stable with the prices. Now, the good thing is there's the rate of appreciation slowing down right now, and inventory is starting to creep up a little bit. Demand is still there, but for me, when I hear the word bubble, like, something's got to pop, right? There has to be an event, which we all probably thought COVID was going to be that event that might have been cataclysmic to all markets, and it just happened to put like a booster engine on the real estate market, making it going bananas. And I would say, there's some risks there that are, interest rates. One of the big reasons why people could afford these crazy prices, because interest rates are at historic lows. So what if interest rates pop up to 4.5%, 5%, 8%, which is where it was, in the early 2000s, when, we did see a bubble pop and people couldn't afford, and there was a variable rate mortgage that happened to expire at that 7th year. And all of a sudden your interest rate went from 4 to 8 and adjusted. So that could be an event to make it go pop. Mortgage forbearance, that right now there's under 2 million people, and the numbers keep coming off and off. And one of the things that was discussed was, when the mortgage forbearance was happening in April of last year, it was basically voluntary, right? There was no need to prove hardship. You just had to state that you were going through hardship. Just like in the early 2000s, there was stated income. I can tell you a lot of those people that were going in there stating they were making $100,000, and then when events happened to not be able to afford their mortgage. There's a lot of the same people that stated they were having a hardship, but just really wanted a mortgage holiday for the last 12 to 18 months. Now, granted, a lot of people maybe were having issues, and that's where that could also be a little thing that goes pop, is how many of those. I think there was like 7 or 8 million that were in mortgage forbearance, and now there's down to under 2 million.
Oh, wow. So that's a huge difference, and we haven't seen anything pop yet, right?
Right. And just over, I think it was like last week, 200,000 people voluntarily removed themselves from mortgage forbearance. So we're going at this rate where maybe there was just a ton of people that wanted, and for safety reasons, probably, because I can tell you there was plenty of times when COVID was happening that I was like, okay, what could happen here? And taking that risk off your plate of, all right, I'm going to save $2,000 a month. Or I'm going to save $2,500 a month. But maybe a lot of that was voluntary. So, there's an event that could happen. And then a third one is the eviction crisis, right? So a lot of people don't have houses. get evicted, can't afford to go another house, so they move in, multi-generational housing, demand goes down, supply increases, and could be an event there. But for me, it is, for it to be a bubble, to pop, there has to be an event. Now, we could go to war. We could have COVID 2.0. There's these unknowns that could always happen and cause a major shift in the real estate market. But for me in Northern Colorado, it gets down to basic economics of supply and demand. We just purely don't have enough housing supply. Builders can't build them fast enough. And people are just now putting on their properties on the market, kind of like, you and your family just didn't feel comfortable with people going through their houses during this last 12 to 18 months.
Yep.
And those people are now just coming onto the market. We had a 1 million house supply shortage of listings over the last 12 months. And so we have this backlog of potentially of 1 million people who would have sold, who are now maybe getting more comfortable with the idea of selling. So it ultimately will take like 7 to 12 times the amount of inventory that we currently have for it to even just get to be a balanced market.
Yeah.
And if we go beyond that, yes, there's a risk of price reductions or plateauing and potentially going down. So I'm not overly concerned about it, but it could happen. I mean, it's a risk.
And the thing I've always seen, and this was before this kind of craziness, COVID inspired kind of market increase with real estate. But when I've looked at kind of the historical numbers and the national averages, I'm sure there's pockets of the world like Michigan back in 2008, 2009, are just kind of finally now recovering, even though most of the country recovered 10 years ago. But basically what I saw when I looked at the previous trends is real estate tends to kind of grow slower, or it might go down like a percent or two. But when you kind of factor in the growth, if it goes up 25% and then it goes down 3%, is that really a pop, or is it, it's not really a big deal? And trying to time something like that is really where I think a lot of people are making some kind of bad decisions. If they can afford a house, and I've heard you create a video similar to kind of my thinking with that. Like, if you can afford the payment, don't try to necessarily time the market, because just waiting isn't necessarily a good strategy, expecting the market to pop and fall drastically. The value could go up 10 or 20% more before it ever drops like 5%. And the mathematics means that it's still got more expensive. So you're waiting. Yes, it might have fallen in value and you were correct, but you weren't correct that it was actually lower in value than when you were trying to make that decision.
Yeah, and I like what that same book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and they talk about timing of the market. And I think you could appreciate this. Actually, a buddy of mine just said this the other day, because I was talking about potential investing in things, and the comment of time in the market is more valuable than timing the market.
Correct.
And it's same goes for the real estate on the side of, are those individuals who are going to wait for this bubble to pop, and they see the market go down 10%, are they going to wait for it to go down 20% before they buy? And then, they miss the bottom. They miss that, it would be such perfect timing. And like for me, when I got started in 2013, when I bought some of my first personal investments, I just look back now and like, when I talk to anybody about investing, I always tell them, I'm like, I wish I could say I'm smart. I just look back and I'm like, lucky as can be that I just happened to get into the market at, a prime time, and, now get to enjoy that benefit. But I was also, I was talking to my wife, I was also very young and dumb. Like I was 22, 23 with like zero risk, zero issues. And so like, I'm like, would we have done the same thing now, having 2 kids, a house, a mortgage? Would we have made some of those plays? And maybe not, but I look back now and I'm grateful that I did.
Yep, for sure. And responsibility and kind of family dynamics definitely change a lot of things. But at the same time, sometimes it just kind of reinforces some of the things. Like I launched my business, and you basically dove into your business once you started having children. I did it 6 months after having our first child. And so like, that's the riskiest, kind of most financial costly mistake most oftentimes that people could ever make is trying to start a business. But we're here multiple years into the future, removed from that. And we did have a family. I think the thing that it was is we just made sure that we didn't allow it to become a mistake or become a kind of financial mishap. And we just kind of worked through it to make it what both of our businesses are today. So kind of talking about all the people, you were naming off all the different states. You like named off half the states, it sounded like, about the people that are moving here into Colorado. And that's definitely one of the reasons too why the prices here might be higher, or the appreciation may be higher than some of the other people watching around the country. But how are you guiding them? What kind of value are you adding to someone that's like, hey, I'm in Chicago, I'm trying to move to Colorado. Like, how are you helping them through this process? Because it's not like someone right down the road, like probably half of your clients at least, who are like, yep, let's go pick out this house. You go meet with them, do the walk, and point out major miles or like actual places around town that like, oh, this is here, this is there, and it actually means something to them. You're saying that to someone in Chicago, like, I don't know what that means. You have to describe that a little bit more than just saying, oh, it's by Hughes Stadium or something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's super interesting. I've worked with people from literally the first time they've seen the property is on the day of closing.
Yeah.
To, yeah, and you're in town, which is interesting. And these folks were out of Florida, and then I've worked with people who come out for a weekend and go like house hunting over like a extended weekend. We knock out 2 days and we find properties that we like, and then they come back for the inspection, and then again at closing. And so I've worked with people all throughout, that kind of range. Yeah. And we're great. We're very fortunate that we live in the world of technology that we do, because, with you guys, we can do FaceTime showings. Like, the things that are tough about FaceTime showings is obviously you don't get to necessarily hear the sounds or smell the smells through FaceTime. And there's a lot.
You did a great job describing it though. Like, I remember one of the houses you went and picked up like a rug that was kind of like in the bathroom. And you're like, and me and my wife afterwards are like, oh man, hopefully he washed his hands. Like, we like picked that up because it was pretty crazy looking.
Oh yeah, and like that's like, it honestly puts more pressure on me because of the trust that these clients are putting in. Whereas, when the person comes in and they walk the house and they're able to see it, there's people who kind of like talk themselves into the house, and then there's people who know exactly what they want and don't want, and they can be in the house for 2 minutes and like no. Whereas when it's a virtual showing, whether I do like a 20, because like sometimes Fort Collins doesn't have the best service, and so we'll do little videos and pictures and things of that nature, allow them to see those that are like real time, real person. Because sometimes I'm telling you, like, some of these photographers for properties should go and like win awards because they make them look huge. The lighting, are able to hide all the nicks and dings and things of that nature. So I would say for me, I'm almost more critical of any and every property because of the fact that they're not going to be walking this. And if they're going to be living in this, I really want them to love it and, be a good home for them and a good value. Because ultimately it's going to come back on me. And I plan on being, again, it's my last name on the business, and I plan on being in it for a really long time. So I definitely don't want to, sour any relationships. And I'm very, very fortunate that I don't need the commission dollars. Yeah. And so again, if I was coming in from out of state, one of my first questions to somebody is, how many houses have you bought this year as a real estate agent? Because if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel and you're going to be making some maybe decisions that's best for your pocketbook and not the clients, that's dangerous. And so for me, it's like, I try to ask as many questions as possible. And that's one of the things coming in from out of state. Like, what are their goals? Are they wanting to be close to the foothills? The majority of people who are moving to Fort Collins in northern Colorado want to be here for the outdoor lifestyle. And, do they want to be close to I-25 because they're going to have to commute down to Denver once a month or twice a month, but they want to live in Fort Collins? Or do they want to be east of I-25 because they want a better view of the mountains? Or do they want to be right along the foothills so that they can walk out their back door and 15 minutes later be on Horseshoe Reservoir? So it's really a deep dive. And the cool thing is a lot of these people that are moving from out of state, their timeline could be anywhere from a month to 12 months. So you build this relationship and trust, and really start to begin to understand each other while going through this process.
Yeah, asking a ton of questions. I know that was something that you did with us before we kind of dove into anything, and it kind of helped kind of hone that process. Luckily, I've known you for a while now, trusted you as much as I could ever trust anyone, and so that was definitely critical in us being able to go through this unique process. One of the questions I know my clients have, so in her situation, moving from Chicago to most likely like Texas, but she was like wondering, like, how do you get like a feel for the neighborhood? So obviously you're not in Texas or wherever she could potentially be moving to, but like if you just had that general question from like a friend that's going to move somewhere else in the country, like what questions should she be asking herself, or like what type of like searches should she be doing for that kind of area to paint a picture of, well, is this something that you'd enjoy and be a community that you'd feel like is a good fit?
Yeah. And again, leveraging technology in the form of, I have clients that are joining Facebook groups. Like they're joining like soccer in Fort Collins and getting to have conversations with people and have relationships outside of me. And then there is also like, next door to where you can kind of come in and see what type of conversations are being had. And then again, I would add like the biggest thing that you can have as a trusted realtor at that point, because, asking them, like, I've got a guy right now that's coming in from California, and, these are some really cool people that are coming in here. He's literally going to go work for a startup and 3D printed space rocket engine. Like, really,
that's crazy.
Legitimately, like cool jobs. But, he asked me, what do you think about this neighborhood? And I just told him like B-. You're kind of, there's a fair amount of rentals here. There's a lot of owner occupied, but like then you get to show them a video of, looking around and seeing the neighbors. Like, is there grass cut? Is there cars propped up on blocks in the other, neighbors, yard is, and then asking him like what the crime is. I would say definitely that's the one thing that my perspective in Fort Collins is, we have such low crime here that when they ask me about crime, I'm like, well, I mean, my biggest thing as far as when I'm looking to invest in properties is, will I park my car outside overnight here? And if I would, then I'd probably invest in that property. And when you're buying a house in Fort Collins, there's pockets that are, a little bit like rough. Like, all right, maybe this isn't necessarily the best area, and I at minimum want a garage and locks on my door.
Yeah.
But you can do some research yourself, but you're going to be relying on one person. And that's where maybe you can leverage different groups and kind of, verify and check what that person's saying by getting involved with different Facebook groups. There's groups for everything on Facebook, and going in and looking up at YouTube videos to watch different people talk about the areas and what opportunities are going there. Nextdoor is a great app that kind of is specific to neighborhoods. But I would say there's no lack of tools to use at your disposal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one thing that definitely stands out for me of you in our situation is you're born and raised in Fort Collins. So like, basically everywhere, like the back of your hand, you have a story about a specific neighborhood, or someone that has lived in a neighborhood where also Fort Collins is big. It's grown a lot since even I've been here the last 11 years. So there's a lot of realtors that have only lived here for a couple months, a couple years. They're not going to have that type of history and background knowledge. So not to say that they would be bad to work with, but if you're going to be moving from out of state, I think you could leverage someone in that area that has actually been there for a substantial amount of time. So I think that makes a ton of sense on that. So one thing I completely skipped over from the beginning as we were kind of going through your story is I guess one thing I can kind of mention, and this is one of our first conversations that we had 4 or 5 years ago when we first kind of started our friendship. Real estate has been such a weakness back in the day for me because as a financial planner, the company I was working for, as well as I've heard of many other financial planners, their goal is to get the money invested in the stock market so that they can get paid more. My business model is a little bit different where I think only like 25% of my clients pay me a majority through their investments. Most of them just pay me for my expertise and strategies and a more kind of complete financial planning. And so it actually has opened up, and I've learned a lot more now about real estate through the tax work I've been doing and my clients that have a lot of rental properties and real estate there. So I'm a huge fan of real estate now. I actually know a lot more than I did 4 years ago. But tell me kind of in your own words, like what is it that you really love about real estate when you think about it in terms of being an investment?
Yeah. And I'm kind of opposite, like I have some money like in like, my Roth simple IRA. My wife's got a Roth, and we got a little bit of crypto for fun, and we play in the game of the stock market, but not necessarily like I mean my portfolio is like 90% real estate,
Yeah.
So like I totally understand that from like a typical financial planning perspective, just because like you do what you know, right?
Yeah.
And, for me, it was real estate. And again, read a couple books, but more or less just jumped in without knowing anything that I was doing.
Yep.
And then started to realize this compounding effect. And there's really like a 4, pillar stronghold in real estate when you look at the appreciation, depreciation, principal pay down, and cash flow. And there's not too many investments where you have a non-taxable event and the depreciation expense that decreases your taxable income.
Yeah.
You're not getting taxed on the appreciation of the property, but it's not real, but as we can see with 25% over one last year, which was crazy, random.
Yep.
But you could still go ahead and sell that $400,000 property now for $500,000 a year later.
Yeah.
And that's an extra $100,000. And then the principal pay down when it's a rental and the cash flow are two things that, yes, they do get taxed, but it's somebody else who's paying down this loan for you. And then I definitely have a strategy of when I go into a investment property for real estate, it has to cash flow from day one, which there's a lot of on the opposite side of an earlier comment that we made of time in the market is better than timing the market is some people like are this, I would say the people I would not want to be right now as far as a bubble goes are the people who are like, I'm going to buy it because it always goes up.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely want to go in there from day one, and you need to be cash flowing. And that could mean a lot of different things. That could mean a neighbor deal who you're able to save commission dollars on and maybe get a better deal because you're going to take it as is and, come in there with cash and make it a really clean, easy deal for them. And then get a renter in there that is able to pay and offset the mortgage, maintenance expenses, property taxes, insurance, and maybe even if it's literally $1, if it's cash flow positive day one, like I'm for it. But there's definitely different mentalities out there, and I think if you're in it for a long term, I'm not a huge fix and flipper. I will do it strategically and opportunistically when the right opportunities come across my plate. Yeah. But I am a buy and hold till I die kind of person. And it's something that for me, I hope to provide generational wealth for my kids. And I'm a dollar cost averaging type of person. And so rather than, try to buy 10 properties in 1 year, buy 2 or 3 each year over the next 10 years. And even though I might buy in 2021 where prices went up 25%, and let's say and I bought those at the peak Whereas in 2022, I buy another property where maybe the market dipped 5%, and maybe I get a little bit better deal. And then the following year, it goes up another 7%. Well, net, we're above that initial purchase price 3 years ago. And that's still a good deal 3 years ago, so long as I can cash flow.
Well, yeah, if you're receiving cash flow, it doesn't necessarily matter. And it's kind of one of the goofy things. And I'll kind of throw this out there, then I'll ask you, what are kind of the frustrating things that you see that kind of drive you nuts as far as misconceptions? But one of the things that I always see is people putting off buying a home because, well, what if the value does fall 10% tomorrow? Well, can you still afford the payment? Yes. Like, where's the issue? You still have the home, you're still able to pay. Yes, it's just happens to be lower than what you purchased it for, but the likelihood in the next couple of years you'll be able to rebound even if things were to dip like that. And you're not really at a loss in that situation. You're still paying down the principal and kind of building that up. What are the things that drive you nuts for people that have kind of misconceptions about real estate?
Definitely. One of my best friends, I had been begging that person to buy a house for years. And during times where the market was going up pretty quickly, in 2017, the market was on fire, not nearly what it is now, but it was on fire. And it was, again, people having conversations about a bubble. And because we were so fresh off of 2008 and 9. And again, now we were very fortunate in Fort Collins that the Great Recession didn't have a massive impact, but there were people who were impacted. And we were at an age, me and you are very similar in age, but we were at an age to, if we were impacted, we may have had an uncle, a dad, a friend or relative who got foreclosed on, lost their house, lost everything, went bankrupt. And that could have been a really scary event for them in their life. And there's just this brain block of timing the market. When's the next bubble? When's it going to burst? You look historically, and historically, like, real estate has done quite well. And as far as like, not bubble resistant, but I would say people will always need a place to live, and they're not making any more land. And our populations now, I think, getting near 8 billion, if I remember right, 7.8 billion or something. So for me, the frustration is people know that it's a big purchase. It's very scary. That's one thing that I forget more than often than not. Sure. How scary and like burden, or how much liability they're taking on. Like, I had somebody who signed a note. They're like, and their mom asked him, or he told me that his mom asked him, "How do you feel?" And he goes, "I owe $450,000, for the next 30 years." And I guess I don't look at it like that, but it's very true. You owe $450,000. You're going to have a mortgage due every month for the next 30 years. Now, the likelihood of somebody staying in that house for 30 years is very minimal. Yeah. But for me, I can, yes, I could probably go save a few bucks on renting, but when you average out the principal pay down and the appreciation of owning your own home over a 10-year span, it's not even close the difference of what you could do, even if you offset the money that you could have used to invest in, the stock market and get, let's just say, 7 to 8% annualized return. Mm-hmm. That's if you do that investment every month on the month. And even at that point, owning your own house, for me, there's just so many benefits. Now, granted, there's not as many with the tax benefits that there used to be with the standardized deduction and things of that nature, which used to be a calling card of realtors. Like, well, you can do this and you can
use it as a tax deduction.
Yeah. And you don't have that anymore because you have such a large standardized deduction. But for me, the pride of ownership, I love coming home, the money that I put into my house, the upgrades that I do, it's going to go to me, not some landlord. And I would say the frustration is the fear that people have that they can offset with knowledge and education. So I think they just need to be willing to know that you don't know everything and ask questions and then make logical decisions from there. Yeah.
And it's so interesting how similar like real estate and the stock market kind of are, because for the longest time, there was all these stories, and this isn't what's going on right now. Right now, there's the stock market frenzy, the crypto frenzy, where all of a sudden everyone just thinks there's no risk ever anymore. But up until like 2 years ago, millennials were like the biggest cash hoarders like ever. They weren't investing at all, whether it was real estate or in the stock market. And then, yeah, for whatever reason, like COVID last year just kind of kicked off. I don't know if it was the student loan forbearance, if it was these mortgage forbearances that people were just opting in, like, oh, I got like an extra $1,500 to do whatever with. But it's interesting. It's because they saw that the parents and grandparents struggle during the last financial crisis, lose everything, not everything if they didn't make big, horrible decisions. And a lot of times, but a lot of times they'll think that because of the stock market, that's why their parents weren't able to retire or those types of things. And the same thing happened with the houses. Like parents lost houses. That was super stressful and super scary. And yeah, education is the best thing to kind of education, awareness, knowledge is going to be the best thing there. I want to open it up. And so if anyone watching right now has any questions for Patrick to answer around real estate, any things that you have always had questions about or always got stumped on when it comes to thinking about real estate, go ahead and put those in. I will think of a couple of other questions too. I'll ask Patrick that comes up, but while we're thinking of those, Patrick, anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, you kind of just you reminded me of something. Really, is another hedge against this bubble that is a potential concern of people. Is I can tell you the one thing for certain, and I've refinanced a few properties over the last 12 to 18 months, is how strict credit agencies are and banks and lenders and loans are with the people that they're giving money to. I mean, they are only giving money to the cream of the crop right now. They are going to check, double check, triple check. On the day of closing, they're going to push you back because they're going to want to verify the last deposit that came into your bank. And so, these banks are terrified right now. Wells Fargo pulling people's lines of credit. And
yeah, that's crazy. That was last week, right?
Yeah. And so like the people that are buying are very financially capable to afford that mortgage. And so there's no stated income. I mean, they will check to make sure everything happens. And so that's something that for me, when I see people that are moving in beside me, I know they are very financially secure to be able to afford that house.
Yeah. And I think the pandemic probably confuses a lot of people. Yes, there's a lot of people on unemployment, but the economy really did grow still. And a lot of the people in the more in-demand kind of career paths, their pay went up, their bonuses went up, they switched jobs, got a huge pay raise. So there's a lot of people making a lot more money now. And if you factor in all the stimulus they still received, even though they didn't necessarily need it in a lot of cases, people are just doing a lot better financially than you would expect after surviving a pandemic, basically.
Definitely.
Yep. So let me pull another question here for you. Cash flow is an important one. That's the only thing that I've ever had in my mind when I think about real estate. Is like, I've heard a lot of horror stories about those newbies in real estate that just kind of want to dive in, and they have that, well, this will appreciate. And I think it's kind of very rare, right? When someone could go into a property and have negative cash flow. The only times that I've seen it where it actually made sense is because they had so much just extra cash flow from their normal job or just kind of other stuff going on where they could take that hit and allow that appreciation to kind of grow. And then, yeah, at the end of the day, they'll probably need to sell it before they ever recognize like that kind of actual growth and appreciation there. So how is it pretty simple just to kind of calculate cash flow? Is it just like the income from the rent minus the basic things that you think of, like the mortgage payment, the property tax, insurance, and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so depending on like the asset class, right? If it's a single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, or above, you can use, generally speaking, it depends on the age of the house and general like geolocation factors, but you could take your gross rent, let's just say $2,000 a month, and you could take an expense ratio, which is going to include your property taxes, your insurance, your maintenance, your management fees, miscellaneous, maybe capital expenditure, to budget for that. And I would say on like the aggressive side, taking a 30% expense ratio, right? So in this case, it would be a $600 per month expense ratio, which should cover, again, property management, taxes, insurance, maintenance, miscellaneous, and you reduce that. So now your net revenue is $1,400 a month. At that point, you're going to have your debt service, right? So whatever your debt service is, let's just say in this case, your principal and interest are going to be $1,350 per month.
Yeah, cash flow positive.
Your cash flow positive of $50. And that's just like, that's super like on the back of a napkin. Will this property work? And so that gets you into, well, should I explore this property further? And at that point, you look at it and be like, okay, it's a new furnace, but a water heater is gone. The roof sucks. The siding needs to work. And from the get-go, I'm going to need to put a capital infusion of $50,000 to get this into a position to where I'm not going to need the monthly maintenance expenses, and really just determine, is that gross rent accurate? And that's where, I mean, if somebody's looking at investing and they're working with a realtor, that's the first question I would ask them is, how do you personally own any investment properties? And then the second question I would ask them is, how many deals have you done this year? At that point, if you're looking to buy investments yourself, I think those two questions would get you to a point where then you can dig in and feel, do you vibe with this person? Do they have similar characteristics, integrity, character that you are looking for in somebody to work with? But if you're talking to, I legitimately, and this is what's sad, I had a realtor who reached out to me, and this was like 6 years ago, asked me what I felt like the rents were in this location of this property. And I think I told her $1,500 a side. And she goes, well, do you think they could get $1,750, $1,800? I was like, not unless it's like granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, like super upgraded and like gorgeous. But I think that's way, way over pushing it. She's like, okay, well, I think if you could tell my clients they could get $1,800 a month, they would feel comfortable moving forward. And I was like, I'm not telling your clients shit. Like, that's terrible. So that would be my first, like, at that point, if you did the back of the napkin, I would verify your rent could get, is in fact going to get that. And you should actually include a loss to lease and a vacancy ratio that'll bring down that like gross revenue or gross rent receipts to a point that kind of gives you a little bit of flex.
Yes. So my financial planning software, and again, this isn't my area of expertise. So when I have clients that have this, there's like some defaults I use there. What do you use when you're looking at vacancy rate?
So historically across the nation, you'd always use about 5%.
Okay.
Right?
Perfect. Yeah, that's what we use. And what I should have done is check with you to make sure that was that was good. But you just confirmed that for me.
I've personally in Fort Collins, because of how strong the market's been using 3% for myself.
Sure.
But I also, if you're going to be buying an investment property and managing it yourself, I would use that 5% unless you have good, vast experience in managing properties. Because, I have a team behind me that literally are going to, I'll buy the investment, I give it to my team, and I walk away, and they do the rest of it.
Yeah. And you have those processes, right? And I'm sure it took a while to get those things kind of synced up, and you're able to cut off days for how long you typically sit or just need to be serviced and kind of turned over.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that capital infusion. Like, how would you factor in that same kind of example of that $2,000 rent, 600 expense ratio, and what was that, $1,350 for the mortgage and debt kind of servicing there, $50,000 capital infusion to bring it up to snuff? Like, how do you factor that in that scenario? Like, off the top of your head, is that just a no-go due to that dollar amount, or would you look and say, well, do you get more rents and kind of figure these things out? Is it more of a puzzle to kind of figure those things?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I could say you could come in and find a property that if you're going to have to put new siding on and new mechanicals and the interior needs upgraded because it's straight out of the 1970s, you should be able to get, now this is a more regular kind of calm market, a good deal on that, a discount.
Yeah.
And you have the right systems in place, maybe you put $50,000 into that property, but when you are done with it, it actually has increased the value by $100,000
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're willing to put in that work, time, effort. And so, yes, that's where if I was going to buy, let's just, use an example. If I felt a property that was not necessarily decked out, but in good condition, well-maintained, is worth $400,000, well, maybe I try to buy that property for $280,000. I put 50 into it. I'm $330,000 into it, but now my property's worth $400,000. I have $70,000 equity that I've built in because I've been willing to do the work. And this person who's owned it for the last 20 years and hadn't put a dollar into it, they walked away with it. They got their money's worth and didn't have to touch a dang thing. So, yeah, I would say you better be getting value, because if you're now in that same situation, if I felt like that property would be worth $400,000 and I could only buy it for $350 and put 50 into it, and it's now worth $400,000, but like I just had to go through all the brain damage, headache, and maybe the market.
And the risk too, right? Like there could have been something else all of a sudden, and you're like, oh man.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I put a 15% contingency budget in a lot of those higher price renovations. And sometimes that 15% gets blown out of the water if you have a main replaced. So definitely, if you're going to take the risk, you need to be able to get that reward on the backside.
Perfect. So kind of related, but more on like a home that you own that you're choosing to make like upgrades and things like that, knowing that you're going to sell it next year or 2 years from now. So it's kind of rare sometimes, right, to actually be able to make those upgrades to your home and actually get that full amount of cost back, unless you're doing those things yourself.
Yeah, and it depends on the price point, right? So like if you are in, let's just say the median price point, well, which now in Fort Collins is about $550,000, which is crazy. But let's just say you're in that median price point or right below, you're going to be appealing to the mass amount of buyers, right? That's going to be the largest buyer pool. And so having a good, clean bathroom, kitchen, flooring and paint will get you all of the value that you need. If you were at a more of a luxury price point of like $750,000 to $1 million, I would leave that 1990s mauve carpet that's in there all of because you're gonna upgrade this property, and the next buyer in is gonna say, I hate that granite that they put in. They're gonna rip it out and put their own stuff in, and so you're just gambling that you're gonna be touching the buyer pool's interests. And yes, I would say it's interesting actually. A partner of mine, like they're all about design, and they would argue me to the that it's worth putting that value in on the design to get the top dollar, and it very well could. Like there's situations and there's designers that are worth their weight in gold, and I am just not that person. Like I am a dollars and cents. If it flushes, it's a good toilet, and if it turns on, it's a good sink type deal. So it's I'm not going to be on the design side, and know your strengths and weaknesses. I'm not going to come in and design a property and provide any value.
Yeah. And it probably, the thing that I see is a lot of times it's like something that they want like now, and they don't want to wait for their next house that they're going to buy most likely in a year or two. And they're like, no, I can put in my man cave in the basement. We'll finish the basement, turn it into a man cave. Like, is that something that you think, like if it's personal toward them, maybe not going to appeal to everyone necessarily, but it definitely adds some value? Do those things you think typically kind of cover? So if it costs like $30,000 or $40,000 to finish a basement and do that type of thing, would they get that back the following year?
See, on that one, I would probably have a different mentality going into it because it's your personal house. And for me, like we finished our basement because we were a growing family, and it was either finish our basement or go buy a new house. And so we finished it, and and I just never thought about it on like the return of investment side. And so with that man cave example, man, I mean, one, if that's like what that person wants, awesome, do it. If they look on it like on the return of investment side, you're going to just be appealing to probably a little bit less of a buyer pool, which then maybe limits the upside potential on that investment, that return, because unfinished basement or just a standard finished basement with a couple bedrooms and a rec room might not appeal to somebody who like purely made like a man cave type option there. So if it's a personal residence and that's what that person wants, if they can afford it financially and it doesn't put them out, I'd say do it and understand that it might return your investment, it might not.
Yep. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, is because what I see is a lot of times like either a husband or a wife, however they decide, is like, oh, they want something, and their argument for doing it now, knowing like very well that they're gonna sell that probably in a year or two, is, oh, we'll make the money back. And typically what I say is like, you'll definitely want to talk with your realtor, like if you spend this money and do this type of thing, if you'll actually likely see that, or if you'll get a fraction of it. You'll get something unless you just do something crazy and like make like a water park in the basement or something like that. That's not going to appeal to too many people. But that's the thing where I think their emotions, and if you can afford it financially, but I think a lot of times spouses or significant others will use that as an argument to be like, oh, let's do this because we're going to get the money back, no problem. But you'll probably get like 70 or 80%, but you should check with an expert realtor in your area for kind of some feedback on that.
It was interesting. I was on a plane there was an appraiser sitting kind of close to me, and we were talking about, or actually it wasn't an appraiser, it was a contractor who was finishing a basement, and his perspective was 50% on every dollar spent on a finished basement was what the return would be. Wow. And I thought that was a really interesting insight. And so either one, you got to get a really good deal on the basement. Like you said, do it yourself, be the equity, be the labor. But if you're going to hire it out, understand there's a real potential that the next person might want it done differently, have different finishes, and might not see the same value that you see in it.
Yep. Perfect. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Patrick. I learned a ton more than I ever knew about real estate, and you'll forever be my real estate expert that I lean on. Anyone in Northern Colorado definitely want to look you up for your YouTube videos. What's the search term they should use? And I'll also make sure it gets into the show notes of the podcast once I release that.
Yeah, on YouTube, if they just searched Fort Collins, they'll see my ugly mug on a few pictures that pop up. And then
Fort Collins, you're that powerful with your search engine?
Yeah, it's pretty. It ranks very well with Fort Collins, which is really fun and awesome. I've been doing it now for a long time and really, pour myself into it. And then on the Instagram side of things, just my name, Patrick Soukup. And I'm having fun with like the reels and the videos right now. So have a fun time.
Yep. And you're bringing your family into it, which again, I think that's something that I really enjoy about it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that will enjoy what you're doing and having fun with this crazy market too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and honestly, like it's been a blast watching you just crush it and be consistent with what you're doing and provide as much value. And your brain works in a very unique way in the sense that you ask and see things differently than I do. And when I have appreciated all the questions you brought to me as far as on the real estate side. And I think you do a great job. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Patrick. And me and Brittany have already thanked you a million times, but what you've done for us with this whole house situation and making the crazy logistics works, we wouldn't have been able to do it with anyone else. So I very much appreciate it. I know Brittany talks about it every single day. And so we definitely appreciate you as a person and definitely as the real estate agent too.
Thank you very much.
All right, man. Thanks for joining me.
All right, buddy.